On September 10, 1945, a farmer in Fruita, Colorado, named Lloyd Olsen swung an axe to kill a chicken for Sunday dinner and missed enough of the brainstem that the rooster didn't die. Instead, the bird, later named Mike, stood back up, shook off the blood, and lived for another 18 months without a head, touring the country as a sideshow marvel while scientists tried to explain how it was even possible. This isn't an urban legend. Mike the Headless Chicken is one of the best documented cases in veterinary history, verified in his own time by university researchers at the University of Utah, written up in Life magazine, and the town where it happened still throws a festival in his honor every year, 80 years later. By the time Mike died, he had traveled to sideshows in Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix, and dozens of towns in between, been examined by curious scientists more than once, and made his owner more money than the family farm itself ever had. All of it happened because one axe swing on one ordinary Sunday morning missed by a fraction of an inch. Lloyd Olsen ran a small poultry farm outside Fruita, Colorado with his wife Clara, raising chickens both for their own table and to sell at market in a town of barely 1,000 people on Colorado's western slope. Clara's mother was coming for Sunday dinner, and Clara asked Lloyd to prepare a chicken, a routine chore he'd done hundreds of times without a second thought. He walked out to the coop and selected a young Wyandotte rooster, a 5.5-month-old bird with the breed's distinctive black and white speckled plumage, and carried it out to the chopping block behind the farmhouse. The standard method was simple and had never once gone wrong for Lloyd before. One clean strike with the axe just below the skull, and the bird would flop and run around briefly on nerve reflex before dying. The origin of the old expression about someone acting frantic, like a chicken with its head cut off. Farmers across rural America performed the same motion daily without thinking twice about the anatomy involved. A chore, not an event, right up until this particular Sunday. Lloyd's axe missed more than he realized. The blow took off most of the head, including the beak, eyes, and most of the skull, but by sheer chance it left roughly 80% of the brainstem and one full ear intact. And because a clot formed almost instantly over the wound, Mike didn't bleed out the way any other chicken in his position would have. The rooster didn't collapse. He stood, shook off a spray of blood, and began walking around the yard as if nothing at all had happened. Lloyd stared in disbelief, certain his eyes were playing tricks on him. The headless bird tried to peck at the ground for feed with a head that no longer existed, and attempted to preen non-existent feathers at the base of his own neck, pure muscle memory with nowhere left to go. Certain the bird couldn't possibly survive the night, Lloyd shrugged, put him in a wooden crate in the barn, and went back inside, fully expecting to find him stiff and dead by morning. Mike was still alive the next morning, and the morning after that, and by the end of the week, Lloyd realized this wasn't a fluke he could ignore. The rooster's basic reflexes, sense of balance, and most vital autonomic functions, breathing, heartbeat, digestion, were still being controlled by the surviving portion of brainstem the axe had spared, since in chickens, unlike mammals, most of these functions are governed lower in the brain than the cerebral cortex that was mostly gone. Rather than finish the job, Lloyd made the decision to keep him alive, feeding him by carefully dripping a mixture of milk and water, and later small softened bits of grain, directly down the open esophagus, with an eyedropper several times a day. Mike thrived under the routine. He gained weight steadily, growing from about 2.5 pounds at the time of the accident to nearly 8 pounds at his heaviest. Nearly twice his original size, still balancing and even attempting to crow, producing a strange gurgling sound through the exposed windpipe instead of a normal call. Word of the impossible chicken spread through Mesa County, and Lloyd eventually brought him to the University of Utah, where researchers examined him directly, took X-rays, and confirmed what seemed impossible. Most of the brain stem and one ear had genuinely survived the axe, keeping Mike authentically, verifiably alive rather than the product of any hoax. With scientific confirmation in hand from the University of Utah researchers, Lloyd and his wife Clara took Mike on tour, and a sideshow promoter named Hope Wade helped manage the growing spectacle. Crowds paid 25 cents apiece to see the headless rooster in person, and the story exploded nationally. Mike appeared in both Life and Time magazine within months, was examined again by veterinarians along the way, and drew enormous crowds at carnivals, fairs, and sideshows stretching from Arizona to California. At his peak, Mike was reportedly earning Lloyd around $4,500 a month, an extraordinary sum in 1946, making him arguably the single most profitable chicken in American history. The tour continued for a year and a half, with Mike billed as Miracle Mike on hand-painted banners, outliving almost every expectation anyone had for him the moment the axe fell, and turning a small Colorado poultry farmer into a minor national celebrity purely by way of his rooster. In March 1947, while on tour and staying overnight in a motel in Phoenix, Arizona, Mike began choking in the middle of the night. Lloyd always carried the eyedropper and a small rubber syringe used to clear mucus from Mike's exposed throat whenever needed, a routine he'd repeated hundreds of times without incident. But this time, in an unfamiliar room in the dark, he couldn't locate it fast enough, and Mike died of asphyxiation before Lloyd could help him, roughly 18 months after the accident that should have killed him instantly. Fruita, Colorado, never forgot its most famous resident. Since 1999, the town has held Mike the Headless Chicken Days every year on the last full weekend of May, complete with a 5K fun run, an egg toss, a chicken dance contest, a pin the head on the chicken game for kids, and a bronze statue of Mike standing in the middle of town, cast in his signature headless pose. Veterinarians and biology researchers still cite Mike's case today in discussions of avian brainstem function and reflex physiology, and his story remains a genuine entry in Guinness World Records for longest surviving headless chicken. Not an exaggeration, but a documented, examined, photographed fact. Lloyd Olsen never sought the spotlight for himself. By most accounts, he remained a quiet, unassuming Colorado farmer for the rest of his life, even after Mike made him briefly famous and comparatively wealthy. He always maintained that he never intended to keep the rooster alive out of any grand plan. He simply couldn't bring himself to finish killing a bird that clearly, stubbornly wanted to keep living. That single moment of hesitation, more than anything else, is what turned an ordinary Sunday chore into 18 months that no one who witnessed it ever forgot, and a legacy that a small Colorado farm town still celebrates 8 decades later.